Listen closely, can you hear it? The faint whisper of an ancient warrior's oath, carried on the wind across centuries, a promise of vengeance, a plea for remembrance, a curse that refuses to fade. These are the echoes of legends that refuse to die, stories woven into the fabric of history, yet tinged with something otherworldly. For as long as humans have fought battles, we've told tales of those warriors who never truly left the battlefield. Their spirits linger, bound by honor, rage, or unfinished destinies, whispering to us from the shadows of time. Today, we're stepping into that shadowy realm where history and myth collide, uncovering 30 of the most haunting legends of warrior spirits, cursed relics, and glory that turned to dust. What if the fallen never truly left? What if their stories weren't just campfire tales, but fragments of something deeper, echoes of real lives, real battles, and real mysteries still waiting to be solved? From the ghostly samurai who wander moonlit forests to the cursed swords that bring ruin to anyone who wields them, these legends aren't just spine-tingling stories. They're windows into the fears, beliefs, and unshakable pride of ancient cultures. These warriors didn't just fight for land or power, they fought for immortality in memory, and in some cases they may have gotten exactly what they wished for. So join me as we walk the line between the known and the unknown, where history's pages blur with the uncanny. We'll trace the footsteps of warriors whose names still send shivers down spines, explore curses that defy explanation, and uncover the chilling truth behind why some legends refuse to stay buried. This isn't just a collection of ghost stories, it's a journey into the heart of what makes us human, our fear of being forgotten, our thirst for glory, and the haunting question of what awaits beyond the final battle. The past is calling, and it has stories to tell. Are you ready to listen? The night air stills over the rocky hills of Thermopylae, where whispers rise like mist from the earth itself, voices chanting in a long-dead dialect, the rhythmic thud of spear against shield echoing where no living soldier stands. This is the legacy of the cursed Spartan Phalanx, 300 warriors whose defiance of the gods condemned them to march forever between worlds. According to local legend, these were no ordinary Spartans but an elite battalion who, during a pivotal battle, abandoned their sacred oath to protect a temple of Artemis. In their moment of retreat, an oracle proclaimed their punishment, to relive their final battle for eternity, never crossing over to the afterlife. To this day, shepherds in the region swear they've seen shadows moving in formation under the full moon, bronze helmets glinting against the darkness. One account from the 1950s describes a farmer who stumbled upon a spectral encampment, figures huddled around a fire that burned without heat, their faces hollow beneath their crests. When archaeologists excavated a nearby pass, they uncovered a peculiar find, a set of spears, all snapped in half and buried tip down, as if marking a grave or a boundary between realms. Even more unsettling, the artifacts dated centuries after the Spartans' supposed extinction, but the most chilling detail lies in the pattern of these sightings. They cluster around the same dates each year, the anniversaries of battles the Phalanx fought, as if time itself loops for these trapped souls, forcing them to replay their disgrace. Could their curse ever be broken? Some say the answer lies in the very temple they failed to defend, where a single offering to Artemis might finally grant them rest. Yet no one who's tried has returned with proof, only stories of distant clanking armor, growing fainter as dawn approaches. And if the thought of an entire battalion bound by a divine curse sends shivers down your spine, wait until you hear of the lone blade that carries the wrath of a warrior who refused to die quietly. A sword so infamous, its mere presence in a room makes candles gutter deep in the vaults of a Kyoto museum, sealed behind glass and warning signs, rests a blade so feared that even its reflection is said to bring misfortune. This is the Curo Oni, or Black Demon, a katana forged not just of steel but of a samurai's last furious breath. The sword's origin traces back to the 16th century, when master smith Muramasa, already infamous for crafting weapons that thirsted for blood, was commissioned by a disgraced warlord. The nobleman, mortally wounded in battle, demanded a blade that would carry his rage beyond death. Witnesses claimed Muramasa performed a forbidden ritual, quenching the red-hot steel not in water but in the warlord's own blood as he took his final breath. The sword's first victim was its creator. Muramasa died within weeks of completing it, his workshop burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances. Over the centuries, the Curo Oni passed through dozens of hand samurai collectors, even a World War II officer, each meeting violent or bizarre ends. One 19th-century merchant who acquired it reportedly woke to find his hair turned white overnight before vanishing into a snowstorm, leaving only his footprints, which stopped abruptly in the middle of an open field. In 1984, a scientist examining the blade with X-rays suffered a sudden stroke, though colleagues noted the machine had inexplicably malfunctioned, showing no images of the sword at all. Modern tests reveal unsettling anomalies. The metal contains traces of arsenic and mercury, common in old forging techniques, but no amount of toxins explain the chilling accounts of those who handled it. Many described hearing whispers in archaic Japanese, feeling an unnatural weight in the blade, as if something resisted being swung. Psychologists suggest the power of suggestion plays a role, yet even skeptics admit there's a pattern too precise to dismiss. The sword's current curator, who wears gloves and avoids direct eye contact during inspections, notes one consistent detail in its history. Every owner died within 365 days of acquiring it, as if the warlord's spirit counts each sunrise, hungry for another soul to join him. Perhaps some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, because while science can analyze the metal, the whispers, the strange malfunctions surrounding the Curo Oni, it cannot measure the weight of a promise made in vengeance. A vow that turned steel into a prison for a fury that refuses to fade. And if you listen closely in that Kyoto museum after closing time, the guards will tell you the glass case sometimes frosts over, even in midsummer. But restless blades are not the only vessels for unfinished vengeance. Far to the north, where the fog clings to the moors like a burial shroud, an entire Roman legion is said to march in silent formation, their ghosts bound by a betrayal that erased them from history's records. The mist that curls through Teutoburg Forest doesn't just obscure the trees, it hides something far older. Nearly 2,000 years ago, this stretch of wilderness witnessed one of Rome's most devastating defeats, where 3 elite legions vanished in a storm of Germanic ambushes. But locals insist the battle never truly ended. On certain fog-laden nights, the forest floor trembles with the muffled tread of sandaled feet, and the air fills with the metallic tang of blood long since spilled. Historians call it the Varian disaster, named for the doomed General Publius Quinctilius Varus, whose forces were lured into these woods and slaughtered by Germanic tribes in 9 AD. The defeat was so catastrophic that Emperor Augustus reportedly wandered his palace, crying out, "Varus, give me back my legions." Yet what's stranger than the historical record are the persistent accounts of those who have wandered Teutoburg after dark. Hikers describe hearing distant trumpet blares in the wrong key for modern instruments, or the sickening thud of javelins striking shields sounds with no visible source. In 1978, a group of archaeologists camping near Calcris Hill, the presumed battle site, woke to find their equipment scattered and their tents slashed as if by unseen blades. Scientists speculate that extreme trauma, whether individual or collective, might leave an imprint on a location, a theory called stone tape, where emotions and events replay like echoes. But Teutoburg's phenomena defy simple explanation. The forest's unique geology, rich in iron deposits, could theoretically amplify electromagnetic activity, potentially fueling these ghostly recurrences. Yet no lab can measure why sightings spike during autumn, the exact season of the ancient massacre, or why witnesses consistently report a figure in a torn crimson cloak presumed to be Varus himself wandering the tree line, his face obscured by a rusted helmet. Perhaps the most chilling detail comes from a medieval chronicle unearthed in a monastery archive. It describes a 12th century woodcutter who stumbled upon a clearing full of skeletal warriors still clutching weapons. When he returned with villagers, the bones were gone, but the earth smelled of burnt flesh, and the trees bore fresh scars no axe could have made. Even today, park rangers avoid certain trails after sundown, citing an oppressive sense of being watched. Some say the legionnaires aren't just replaying their deaths, they're waiting for revenge, for recognition, or simply for someone to finally lay their ghosts to rest. And if the thought of an entire legion trapped between worlds unsettles you, consider this. Sometimes the dead aren't bound by place, but by a single, unbreakable oath. Like the Celtic queen who defied Rome with such ferocity that her punishment transcended death itself, a spirit condemned to ride the skies forever, heralding doom with her wail. The wind howls across the moors of East Anglia with a voice that sounds almost human, a keening wail that locals swear belongs to Boudicca, the flame-haired queen whose rebellion shook the Roman Empire to its core. They say her chariot still cuts through the mist on moonless nights, its scythe-rimmed wheels glinting like teeth, her spectral warriors trailing behind in eerie silence. This is no mere ghost story. It's the echo of a rage that refused to die with the body, a curse woven into the very soil of Britain. History remembers Boudicca as the warrior queen who united Celtic tribes in 60 AD, razing Roman strongholds to the ground after her daughters were brutalized and her kingdom stolen. But the ancient texts whisper of something darker. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, as Boudicca lay dying, whether by poison or battle wounds is debated, she called upon the goddess Andras to ensure her enemies would never know peace. Within months, the Roman governor who'd provoked her rebellion was recalled in disgrace, his health broken, the lands where her final battle took place. Barren for generations, as if the earth itself rejected cultivation, modern paranormal investigators have flocked to sites linked to Boudicca, from the ruins of Camulogenum to the shadowed lanes of Watling Street. Thermal cameras capture sudden cold spots in midsummer, and electromagnetic meters spike near ancient oak trees. Folklore claims she used as gallows for Roman prisoners. In 2012, a team from the University of Leicester recorded audio near Norfolk's presumed battle site, a woman's voice speaking in a dialect dead for centuries, repeating a phrase linguists later translated as blood for blood. Skeptics argue it's pareidolia, the mind hearing patterns in random noise, but the timing chills even the rational. The recording was made on the anniversary of Boudicca's final stand. What makes her legend endure isn't just the violence of her rebellion, but the unresolved injustice that fueled it. Unlike other warrior spirits bound by curses or unfinished battles, Boudicca's ghost seems to ride with purpose. Witnesses describe her apparition staring toward the horizon, as if watching for something or someone. Medieval chronicles tell of farmers who glimpsed her near old Roman roads, her chariot vanishing when approached, leaving behind trampled grass and the scent of iron. A 1980s excavation near Colchester uncovered a mass grave of Roman citizens with one skeleton set apart, its skull crushed by what might have been a chariot wheel. Coincidence or a grisly marker of her eternal patrol? The question lingers, is she a vengeful spirit or a guardian of the land she failed to protect? Some scholars suggest her curse wasn't aimed at Rome alone, but at all who would betray their people. In 2019, a controversial theory emerged linking Boudicca's sightings to political upheavals, her apparition reportedly seen pacing the Thames the night before Brexit, or hovering near Hadrian's Wall during Scottish independence rallies. Whether myth or metaphor, her defiance transcends time. And if the idea of a queen riding centuries after her death unsettles you, consider this: what if some oaths aren't bound by mortal lifetimes? What if honor, or the lack of it, can chain a soul to the earth as surely as iron chains the body? Because halfway across the world, in the jungles of Cambodia, another warrior's spirit is said to guard a treasure far more precious than gold, a secret that cost him his life and perhaps his peace beyond it. The wooden floorboards of an abandoned dojo in Kyoto Creek under no visible footstep, the sound followed by the sharp, unmistakable shing of a blade being drawn. For centuries, students training here have reported the same phenomenon: an unseen opponent who mirrors their every move, striking with precision no living swordsman could match. This, they say, is the work of Takashi the Unyielding, a Ronin whose refusal to sheathe his sword in life condemned him to an eternity of duels. Historical records from the Edo period mention a masterless samurai who wandered Japan, challenging dojos to prove his skill. But Takashi's downfall came not from defeat but from dishonor. According to scrolls preserved in a Nagasaki temple, he broke the sacred Bushido code by striking down an unarmed opponent, a merchant who'd insulted him. From that moment, Takashi was said to be haunted by his own blade, the katana growing heavier with each kill until he could no longer lift it. Yet even in death, his spirit couldn't escape the cycle of combat. Witnesses describe a gaunt figure in tattered hakama, his eyes hollow, forever rehearsing the duel that damned him. The dojo where these sightings cluster holds another secret. Beneath its floor, archaeologists found a single rusted sword plunged into the earth, a ritual burial meant to pacify a restless spirit. But locals claim the blade isn't Takashi's, it's the weapon of the merchant he murdered, planted there to bind the Ronin to the site. Paranormal investigators who visited in 2019 recorded infrared footage of a shadowy figure bowing before an empty corner, as if acknowledging an opponent only he could see. The temperature drops sharply during these apparitions, and those brave enough to stay overnight speak of hearing labored breathing, though no one else is present. What makes Takashi's legend so enduring isn't just the ghostly duels, but the universal lesson woven into his curse. Bushido taught that a warrior's soul resided in his sword. To dishonor the blade was to fracture the spirit. Modern psychologists suggest the dojo's phenomena could be a form of communal hallucination, triggered by the weight of history and the power of suggestion. Yet there's a chilling consistency to the accounts. The invisible opponent always fights left-handed, just as Takashi was said to in life. Coincidence? Or proof that some vows, even broken ones, hold more power than death itself? But restless warriors aren't confined to Japan. Far across the seas, where the northern lights dance over icy fjords, an even older specter haunts the waters. Fishermen off the coast of Norway tell of a ship that glides against the wind, its sails tattered but its hull gleaming as if newly built. This is the Naglfar, the fabled vessel of the dead, said to carry warriors cursed to sail until Ragnarok. According to Norse sagas, the ship is built from the fingernails of the deceased, a macabre detail meant to warn against dying with untrimmed nails, lest you contribute to its construction. But one account from the 1400s stands out. A shepherd's diary describes seeing the Naglfar anchored near shore, its deck crowded with figures in ancient armor. Among them stood a towering warrior whose face was hidden by a raven-crested helm, a detail matching the description of Sigurd Snake Eye, a Viking king who vanished during a storm after defying the gods. Unlike other phantom ships that fade upon approach, the Naglfar reportedly lingers, its crew silently watching the living before vanishing into the mist. In 1934, a lighthouse keeper claimed the ship appeared the night before a devastating tidal wave, as if heralding disaster. The connection between these two legends, Takashi's endless duels and the Naglfar's ghostly crew, lies in the idea of unfinished purpose. Both spirits are bound not by place but by the weight of their choices. For the Ronin, it's the shame of a broken code. For the Vikings, the refusal to accept mortality. Perhaps that's why their stories resonate across cultures. They remind us that some battles don't end with the last breath. And if you listen closely on a still night near Kyoto's dojo or Norway's shores, you might just hear the echoes of those who learned that truth too late. The sea mist rolls in thick off the Norwegian coast, clinging to the waves like a burial shroud, and with it comes the creak of oars that haven't touched water in centuries. This is no ordinary fog. Fishermen here whisper of the draugr, the drowned dead of Viking legend, who rise from their watery graves to guard their treasures in ships that sail long after their crews have turned to bone. According to Norse sagas, not all warriors who died at sea reached Valhalla. Those who fell to greed, betrayal, or cowardice were cursed to become draugr, their bloated corpses haunting the shores in spectral longships. The 13th century Flateyjarbók manuscript describes these revenants as larger than living men, their flesh blackened by the deep, their eyes glowing like drowned embers. Coastal villages from Iceland to Sweden still share stories of fishermen who have glimpsed these phantom vessels, ships with tattered sails that move against the wind, their decks crowded with shadowy figures clutching rusted axes. One account from 1892 tells of a crew near Bergen that narrowly escaped a collision with a ghostly longship, only to watch it dissolve into the storm clouds, leaving behind the stench of rotting seaweed. But what binds these spirits to their ships? Viking lore suggests it's not just unfinished business but unfulfilled oaths. A warrior who swore to protect his lord's hoard in life might find himself compelled to guard it in death, even as the sea claims his body. Archaeologists have found evidence of this belief in burial sites along the Scandinavian coast, ships interred with swords placed deliberately across skeletons, as if to arm the dead for eternal vigilance. In 2014, a team excavating a 9th century grave in Gokstad uncovered a chieftain buried with his vessel, his fingers fused around a silver coin. Local legend claims the site is still watched by a hulking figure who drags a limp leg, a detail matching skeletal evidence of the chieftain's battle injury. The most chilling tales, however, involve the draugr's hunger for the living. Medieval law codes from Iceland reference drowners' courts, where drowned men were posthumously tried for crimes to prevent their return. Fishermen in the Faroe Islands still carry iron nails in their boats, a folkloric ward against the draugr, who are said to fear the metal's purity. In 1971, a lifeboat crew off the Lofoten Islands reported being pursued by a ship of corpses during a squall, their engines failing inexplicably until one sailor threw his grandfather's iron knife overboard, at which point the phantom vessel vanished. Skeptics blame these accounts on sleep deprivation or methane hallucinations from rotting kelp, but the consistency of the details is unsettling. Witnesses across centuries describe the same phenomena: unnatural silence before the ship appears, a sudden drop in temperature, and the unmistakable sound of water sloshing in a hull that isn't there. Perhaps the most infamous draugr legend revolves around King Hakon the Red, a ruler whose greed supposedly birthed a curse that lingers to this day. His saga tells of a horde so vast, he sacrificed his own men to protect it, drowning them in a sealed longship to serve as eternal sentinels. To this day, treasure hunters along the Trondelag coast tell of a black-sailed ship that appears when storms gather, its crew howling a word that scholars translate as mine. And if the thought of a king's avarice echoing through the ages sends a shiver down your spine, brace yourself. Because the next tale takes us from the frozen north to the sweltering jungles of Mesoamerica, where a warrior's curse didn't just haunt a ship, it poisoned an entire empire. The jungle heat shimmers over the ruins of a forgotten temple. Its stones stained a peculiar shade of rust, not from age, but from the blood of those who tried to claim what wasn't theirs. This is where the legend of King T-Zapotel's golden hoard begins, a treasure so cursed it twisted the minds of men across centuries. The Mixtec codices tell of a ruler who grew fat on stolen gods, looting sacred relics to forge a throne of gold. But when priests warned him the gods demanded restitution, T-Zapotel laughed, until the day his own son turned the royal dagger against him, whispering words that chilled the court. "They showed me where you hid it." The king's hoard vanished after his murder, yet its trail of madness never faded. Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s wrote of a gilded chest found in a cave, its lock fused shut by what appeared to be melted skin. The soldier who pried it open died within hours, raving about jewels that bled. 3 centuries later, a French archaeologist uncovered a golden mask near Oaxaca, only to scribble in his journal that its hollow eyes followed him before vanishing from his tent, along with 2 porters. Modern metal detectorists still whisper of a heat that moves beneath certain riverbanks, a phenomenon geologists can't explain, though locals attribute it to T-Zapotel's restless spirit guarding his plunder. What makes this curse so potent isn't just the treasure's origin, but the pattern of its appearances. Like the Dyatlov Pass or the Hope Diamond, T-Zapotel's gold emerges at moments of human greed, leaving ruin in its wake. In 1934, a prospector near Monte Alban stumbled upon a jade figurine, and within weeks orchestrated his brother's deaths for the rest of the hoard, only to be found clutching dirt, his mouth packed with gold flakes. Forensic psychologists called it folie à Dieu, but the tribal elders knew better. They burned the artifacts he'd collected in a ritual pit, noting the flames burned blue without smoke. The parallels to other cursed gold legends are unnerving. From the Nibelungenlied's Rheingold to the Navajo stories of turquoise that brings drought, cultures worldwide share this motif. Wealth ripped from sacred ground carries a divine tax. Perhaps the most striking echo comes from the Aztecs, who spoke of a warrior's blood oath sealed in a chest of tribute gold. When Cortés' men raided Moctezuma's treasury, they described one statue that wept red tears, an idol later lost in the night of sorrows, along with hundreds of conquistadors who drowned under the weight of their loot. But T-Zapotel's curse has a twist that chills even skeptics. Unlike typical ghost stories where the dead seek revenge, his legend suggests the gold itself is alive. Modern hunters report GPS devices failing near suspected sites, or photographs that develop showing hands grasping from within the earth. In 2018, a team using ground-penetrating radar near Mitla claimed their screen displayed a perfect circle of heat signatures, 22 in total, spaced like sentinels around a central void. They fled when their drill hit something metallic, and the machine's engine began screaming in a voice that didn't belong to any mechanic. perhaps some treasures aren't meant to be found. Or perhaps, like the Aztec warrior who swore his spirit would guard his people's wealth until the sun died, T-Zapotel's horde waits for something or someone specific. Because the oldest version of the myth, carved on a shattered steel in the jungle, ends with a line that haunts historians. When the jaguar eats the moon, the king will count his debt in souls. And if you check the lunar calendar, the next eclipse passes directly over his ruined palace. The air in the Valley of Mexico grows heavy with the scent of copal incense, even where no fire burns. Here, beneath the shadow of the ancient Taclomachen, the whispers of the Cuautli warriors still echo. These were no ordinary soldiers, but the Aztec Empire's most feared elite, the Eagle Warriors, chosen not just for their skill in battle, but for their willingness to pledge their very souls to protect the sacred. According to the Florentine Codex, a 16th century record of Aztec life, these men underwent a ritual more binding than death itself. On the night before their initiation, they would drink a mixture of their own blood and obsidian dust, swearing an oath that transcended mortality. Even when my bones are dust, my spirit will stand guard. Recent excavations near Teotihuacan have unearthed something chilling, a cluster of jade and obsidian amulets buried in a perfect circle, each carved with an eagle's talon. The artifacts date to the reign of Moctezuma II, but here's what unsettled researchers. The stones were ice cold to the touch, even when dug from sun-baked earth. Laboratory tests showed no chemical explanation for the temperature anomaly, though one thermographer noted the cold seemed to radiate from the carving's hollow eyes. Local Nahua elders weren't surprised. Their oral traditions speak of the Eagle's Vigil, spirits bound to hidden temples by those blood pacts, their presence marked by sudden chills and the cry of a bird where no bird flies. Archaeologists remain divided. Some argue the cold artifacts could result from underground water currents or mineral conductivity, pointing out that the Aztecs were master engineers who might have designed such effects to awe their people. But others note a pattern too precise to dismiss. These amulets are always found facing the 4 cardinal directions, as if standing watch. In 2019, a drone survey of a remote canyon near Melanalco captured thermal images of humanoid figures near a ruined shrine, figures that vanished when investigators arrived on foot. The site matched a description from a conquistador's diary. The heathens swore their warriors waited in the rocks, and by God, I felt their eyes upon me. What makes these legends so compelling isn't just the supernatural elements, but the tragic humanity beneath them. The Cuautli weren't mindless guardians. They were men who loved, feared, and mourned. One heartbreaking account from the Codex Mendoza tells of a warrior named Itztli, who begged release from his oath to join his slain wife in the afterlife. The priests refused, and the Codex claims his spirit still paces the ruins of Tenochtitlan, his spectral hand brushing the stones where she once walked. This duality, fierce loyalty and undying love, mirrors the Greek tragedies where oaths outlived their makers, like Antigone defying kings to bury her brother, or Orpheus descending into Hades for Eurydice. The Eagle Warriors' stories remind us that the most powerful bonds aren't forged in life, but in what comes after. Perhaps that's why their legends endure, not as ghost stories, but as testaments to the terrible beauty of promises that even death cannot break. And if the thought of a love strong enough to defy eternity sends shivers down your spine, wait until you hear of the Celtic queen whose grief was so vast, it carved itself into the landscape, a sorrow so deep, the earth itself still weeps. Sat the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans once made their immortal stand. Another story lingers, one not of war, but of love. Locals speak of 2 warriors, Leon and Demerottos, whose bond defied even the finality of death. While history remembers the battle, folklore whispers of these men, who fought side by side in life and whose spirits now reunite each summer solstice, when the heat shimmers like a mirage over the ancient stones. Visitors to the pass report sudden, inexplicable chills in the midday sun, or the sound of quiet laughter echoing where no living soul stands. A British traveler's diary from 1893 describes the most haunting account. While sketching the battlefield at dusk, he claimed to see two figures silhouetted against the cliffs, one adjusting the other's battered helmet with a tenderness that froze his breath. As he reached for his lantern, the vision dissolved, leaving behind only the scent of olive oil and iron, and a single eagle feather drifting to the ground. Modern paranormal investigators have recorded spikes in electromagnetic activity at the site every June, coinciding with the solstice. But what chills researchers isn't the data, it's the consistency of the details across centuries. From medieval monks to modern hikers, witnesses describe the same pair, a tall warrior with a spear scar across his palm, and a younger man whose ghostly fingers are perpetually intertwined with his companions. The tragedy, historians confirm a Demerottos did serve under Leonidas. Scrolls in Athens' archives mention a Spartan exile who returned to die beside his lover in the final stand. Their names appear together on a fragmentary stele near the pass, the inscription weathered but still legible. No dawn nor dusk shall part them. Could their spirits truly be bound by that vow? Psychologists suggest the power of suggestion plays a role. Thermopylae's legend primes visitors to see what they expect. Yet skeptics pause when confronted with the physical traces, flowers left at the stele that never wilt, or the way cameras malfunction only when pointed at a specific stretch of the cliff face. This tale mirrors a darker counterpart across the sea. In the Scottish Highlands, a crumbling menhir known as the Lover's Stone bears Ogam carvings warning of a Celtic curse, one that fused two souls so completely, not even death could untangle them. The legend tells of a warrior and a druid's daughter who defied their clan's feud. When they were slain on the same battlefield, their grieving mothers invoked the old magic, binding their spirits to the stone. Now, on the anniversary of their deaths, rainwater trickling down the menhir's grooves is said to form phantom handprints. Unlike Thermopylae's bittersweet reunion, this curse carries a warning: touch the stone on that night, and you'll hear not whispers but screams. What threads these stories together isn't just romance, but the raw power of oaths. The Spartans swore to stand together unto death and perhaps beyond. The Celts believed words carved in stone could outlast flesh. Both legends ask the same haunting question: when love becomes as unyielding as a shield wall or as immutable as runes, who's to say where the boundary lies between devotion and damnation? The answer might lie in the earth itself. At Thermopylae, archaeologists recently uncovered a pair of broken spear tips buried tip to tip beneath the stele, a burial custom reserved for bonded warriors. And in Scotland, ground-penetrating radar revealed two skeletons curled together beneath the menhir, their bones fused where a bronze brooch pinned their cloaks. Coincidence or proof that some bonds, whether forged by love or curse, leave marks even time cannot erase? Perhaps that's why these stories endure, not as ghostly anecdotes, but as reminders that the heart's battlefield knows no surrender. And if you walk Thermopylae's pass at twilight, listen closely. The wind through the rocks doesn't just sound like clashing swords sometimes, it sounds like a sigh. The wind that slices through the Burren region of Ireland doesn't just carry the scent of peat, it carries words, ancient words carved into the very bones of the landscape. These are the Ogam stones, towering sentinels etched with cryptic scripts that locals insist aren't merely messages but warnings. The grooves cut into these monoliths aren't just letters in a forgotten alphabet. They're said to be binding spells, curses meant to summon guardians from the earth itself when disturbed. One such stone, the Lear Fail near Tara, bears an inscription scholars translate as "Who moves me moves the dead." In 1923, a team from Trinity College attempted to excavate its base. Their journals tell of tools vanishing overnight, of a low growl that seemed to rise from the soil itself. On the third morning, they arrived to find their equipment scattered and fresh Ogam carvings scratched into the stone's surface, though no human hand could have reached its height. The lead archaeologist, a staunch rationalist, abandoned the dig after waking to find his tent flap tied shut with a braid of human hair, a material carbon dated centuries older than their camp. The phenomenon isn't isolated. In County Kerry, a standing stone known as the Soldier's Judge reportedly causes compasses to spin wildly when approached after dusk. Local lore claims it marks the grave of a warrior who swore to protect a sacred grove, his spirit taking the form of a massive black wolf. Modern visitors have captured thermal images of something pacing the stone's perimeter, a heat signature matching no known animal, its movements too deliberate, too human in their pauses. Scientists offer compelling alternatives. The Burren's limestone bedrock contains high concentrations of magnetite, which could explain the compass anomalies. Sleep paralysis or infrasound frequencies below human hearing that induce dread might account for the auditory hallucinations, but these theories falter when faced with the physical traces. In 2015, a geology student taking core samples near an Ogam stone in Clare found the drill bit clogged with a substance later identified as Iron Age embalming resin from a depth no burial should have reached. The debate takes a darker turn in the Himalayas, where the Valley of Voices echoes with sounds no living throat could produce. Shepherds in Nepal's Mustang district avoid the area after sundown, speaking of shadows that move against the wind and a chorus of battle cries in a dialect dead for millennia. In 2017, a documentary crew recording ambient noise captured a clear voice snarling, "Turn back" in Proto-Tibetan, a language only deciphered from manuscripts found in sealed caves. Linguists confirmed the pronunciation matched military commands from the Zhangzhung Kingdom, a civilization swallowed by the sands 1,500 years ago. What connects these distant sites? The unsettling consistency of the details. Whether in Ireland or the Himalayas, witnesses describe the same progression. First a whisper, then a gust of inexplicably cold air, and finally the sensation of being measured by something just beyond sight. Archaeoacoustics researchers suggest certain rock formations might act as natural recording devices, vibrating in ways that play back ancient sounds under specific conditions. But that doesn't explain why these phenomena cluster around markers of violence, battlefields, execution sites, tombs of warriors who died mid-oath. Perhaps the stones aren't just warnings. Perhaps they're invitations to listen, to remember, and above all to tread lightly, because some boundaries weren't meant to be crossed and some guardians never truly sheathed their swords. Far to the east, where the go-by sands shift like a restless sleeper, another kind of sentinel waits, one not of stone but of silk and bone, the mummified general of the Taclomachen, whose tomb bears an inscription that chills even seasoned archaeologists. "I sleep with one eye open." But that is a tale for another night. The thin air of the Himalayas plays tricks on the mind, or so the Sherpas say. But in a high pass near the Nepal-Tibet border, the tricks take a darker turn. Climbers call it the Howling Valley, a stretch of rock where the wind doesn't just whistle, it screams. Accounts from the 1920s onward describe the same unnerving phenomenon, the sound of bronze clashing against iron, the rhythmic thump of war drums, and sometimes most chillingly, a chorus of voices chanting in a language linguists later identified as Old Zhangzhung, a tongue dead for over a millennium. The locals know why. This pass was the site of the Great Massacre of 722 AD, where a Tibetan warlord ambushed a Zhangzhung caravan, slaughtering hundreds in a dispute over sacred relics. According to the Blue Annals, a medieval Tibetan chronicle, the slain warriors swore their spirits would guard the pass until the relics were returned. To this day, yak herders avoid the area after dark, leaving offerings of barley and juniper smoke to appease the dry, vengeful spirits said to mimic the sounds of their deaths. Scientists have plausible explanations. The valley's unique acoustics, shaped by its bowl-like formation, can amplify distant noises. Combined with altitude-induced hypoxia, climbers might misinterpret natural sounds like boulders shifting or ice cracking as something more sinister. In 2014, a research team from Kathmandu University set up audio equipment in the pass. Their recordings captured something startling: infrasound waves at frequencies known to induce dread in humans, coinciding with reports of phantom noises. But here's the twist. When analyzed, one recording revealed a pattern too precise to dismiss a sequence of impacts matching the cadence of a Zhangzhung battle hymn described in ancient manuscripts. The mystery deepens with the relics themselves. The warlord who ordered the massacre reportedly took a jade amulet said to contain a sliver of the Buddha's bone. Modern historians traced it to a museum in Lhasa where curators note the display case inexplicably frosts over every year on the massacre's anniversary. Whether psychological suggestion or something older, the pattern is undeniable. Climbers who have taken photos near the pass often find blurred figures in the background, shapes that weren't visible through the viewfinder. One trekker's journal from 1987 describes waking to find his tent flap knotted with a strip of ancient leather, its edges charred as if by ritual fire. But if the Howling Valley teaches us anything, it's that some landscapes absorb history like a sponge. The same forces that warp perception might also, just maybe, crack open doors to the past. And if that thought sends a shiver down your spine, consider the deserts of Arabia, where the heat doesn't just bend light, it bends time. Travelers there speak of mirages that show not water, but armies marching under banners no living hand has woven. The desert sun bakes the Sahara into a vast, shimmering mirror, one that doesn't just reflect light, but sometimes something far stranger. Bedouin elders speak in hushed tones of the Ashab al-Ri, the people of the wind, phantom armies that materialize in the heart of sandstorms. These spectral warriors don't just appear, they move with purpose, their silhouettes flickering between the dunes like a mirage given sentience. Some claim these phantoms guide lost travelers to hidden oases. Others swear they lure the unwary into the depths of the Erg, where the sands swallow all traces of their passage. Historical records add eerie weight to these tales. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote of the 9th Hispana cohort, which vanished near the Fezzan region in 87 AD while pursuing rebel Garamantes tribesmen. Later Arab chronicles mention a legion of ghosts seen wandering the same area centuries after Rome's fall, their armor glinting through the haze. In 1934, a French Foreign Legion patrol reported tracking a column of foot soldiers near Ghadames, only for their footprints to vanish abruptly at a rock formation, matching the description of a long-buried Roman way station. Could these be mere hallucinations? Science offers compelling explanations. Fata Morgana, a complex mirage effect caused by thermal inversion, can distort distant objects into towering apparitions. Combine that with the disorienting effects of heat exhaustion, and even seasoned travelers might swear they've seen an army marching on the horizon. But the Bedouin stories share unsettling details that defy simple physics. the clank of unseen armor, the smell of rust and sweat in air too dry to carry scent, and, most chillingly, the sensation of being watched by figures who never fully materialize. The most haunting accounts come from the Tenere region, where a 20th century oil survey team allegedly stumbled upon a sand-choked ruin. Their notes describe frescoes of Roman soldiers, their faces eerily lifelike, their eyes following the viewer. When they returned with cameras, the site had vanished beneath the dunes, but their seismographs picked up metallic echoes deep underground, arranged in perfect marching formation. Geologists suggest these could be deposits of magnetite, but the local Tuareg have another name for the phenomenon: the buried ones tapping at the sky. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between science and legend. The Sahara was once a greener land, crisscrossed by Roman roads and Garamontes trade routes. Could the Ashab al-Rib be echoes of real warriors, their final moments etched into the landscape like a desert palimpsest, or are they something darker, guardians of a secret that sank beneath the sands? Because if the desert can preserve the dead, so too can the sea. Off the coast of Tunisia, where the Mediterranean's blue depths hide the bones of triremes and war galleys, fishermen whisper of a submerged army. Their oars still rise and fall with the tides, their silent battle cries carried on currents that lead not to shore but into the abyss. The waters of the Aegean hold more than sunken treasures, they cradle the restless dead. Divers exploring these depths have returned with stories that chill the blood. Figures in corroded armor standing motionless on the seabed, their hollow gazes fixed on some unseen horizon. In 2011, a team documenting a 5th century BC wreck off the coast of Crete captured sonar images of humanoid shapes near the ship's prow. When they descended, the shapes were gone, but their cameras malfunctioned, recording only a low, guttural chanting in a dialect linguists later identified as ancient Doric. These aren't isolated incidents. Fishermen near Salamis whisper of the Watchers, spectral hoplites who emerge from the mist when storms gather, as if replaying the famed naval battle that once decided Greece's fate. Archaeologists initially dismissed these tales until a 2018 expedition to a Persian warship uncovered something inexplicable: a set of perfectly arranged Spartan helmets on the seafloor, their crests still intact despite centuries of tide. No remains lay beneath them. The local dive master, a man with 30 years of experience, refused to return after that season, muttering about hands that pushed from below. Science offers partial explanations. The Mediterranean's unique underwater acoustics can bend sound into eerie imitations of human voices, especially near volcanic vents that release methane. But that doesn't account for the physical traces. In 2020, marine biologists studying a Roman galley near Rhodes discovered barnacles growing in unnatural pattern spirals that matched the tattoos described on Thracian mercenaries in Herodotus's histories. Even skeptics pause at the timing. Most sightings occur in October, the anniversary of the Battle of Actium, where Cleopatra's fleet met its doom. Perhaps the most unsettling connection lies not in the sea, but in the forests of Thrace. Divers who have encountered these sentinels often speak of a pull, as if something beckons them toward a stretch of coastline where the trees are said to bleed when cut. A Byzantine chronicle mentions a grove sacred to Ares, where wounded warriors vanished without graves. Modern satellite imagery shows a circular depression in the earth there, a formation geologists say resembles a submerged battle trench. Could the Aegean's ghosts be anchored to this place, their spirits divided between the depths and the land where they first fell? The answer might lie in the water itself. Oceanographers note that the Aegean's currents create strange gyres, swirling in patterns that mirror ancient shield formations. Some theorize these natural phenomena could focus energy, acting as conduits for something beyond our understanding. But the local elders need no theories. They've known for generations what science hesitates to admit. Some battlefields never grow quiet, and some warriors never drop their swords. Even when the sea claims them, they rise again when the moon is right, guardians of a shore the living can no longer see. And if the thought of armored phantoms patrolling the deep leaves you uneasy, consider this. The next tale takes us from the Aegean saltwater graves to the peat bogs of northern Europe, where warriors interred 2,000 years ago still open their eyes. The trees of Calca weep crimson. Not in metaphor, in thick, viscous droplets that stain the hands of those brave enough to touch them. This stretch of forest near Delhi isn't just a battleground from 1221, where Mongol and Rajput forces clashed in a slaughter so brutal it altered the course of Asian history. It's a place where the earth itself seems to grieve. Locals call it Raktavan, the blood grove, and their stories speak of roots that clutch at bones, of branches that creak with the weight of unseen armor. Scientists have studied the phenomenon for decades. The Pterocarpus santalinus, or red sandalwood, native to the region, does indeed exude a dark red sap when damaged, a natural defense against insects. But the trees at Calca produce far more sap than their counterparts elsewhere, seeping from unbroken bark in sync with the lunar cycle. Botanists from the University of Delhi found elevated levels of iron oxide in the sap, giving it that unnerving blood-like hue. Yet even they pause when confronted with the grove's other quirks, the way metal detectors ping erratically over roots as if detecting buried weapons, or how thermal imaging reveals phantom heat signatures in human shapes near the oldest trunks. The folklore runs deeper than science can explain. Villagers whisper that the battle never truly ended here. Night watchmen report hearing the skink of blades being drawn at moonrise, followed by a chorus of war cries in dead languages. In 1989, a documentary crew captured something chilling. A close-up of sap oozing from a gash in a tree, but the footage appears to show the liquid flowing upward, defying gravity. The director insisted they hadn't manipulated the film, though physicists insist it's impossible. Perhaps the most unsettling account comes from a British colonial officer's diary. Stationed near Calca in 1857, he described finding a sandalwood sapling with bark that split open under his gaze, revealing what looked like a human tooth embedded in the wood. When he returned with a team, the tree showed no such mark, but his boots left rust-colored prints for weeks afterward, as if the soil refused to let him forget. This idea that land remembers violence echoes across cultures. In Scotland, the Culloden Moor battlefield grows no heather where the Jacobites fell. Japanese farmers near Sekigahara still plow up arrowheads that surface after heavy rains as if the earth rejects them. But Calca's bleeding trees suggest something more visceral. That trauma might seep into the very veins of a landscape, rewriting its biology. And if the thought of sentient terrain unsettles you, wait until you hear of Chittorgarh Fort. There, the stones themselves are said to replay their final siege, phantom flames licking the ramparts every August, the scent of burning ghee carried on windless nights. Guards swear the clang of swords rings from empty towers, always stopping at the hour the Queen's funeral pyre was lit. Historians note these phenomena align with atmospheric conditions that could create acoustic illusions, but try telling that to the workers who have fled, claiming the fort's shadow stretches the wrong way at dusk. Perhaps some scars never heal, whether through chemistry, collective memory, or something beyond our understanding. Places like Calca and Chittorgarh force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Violence leaves marks deeper than history books can record. And sometimes the land itself becomes the last witness, the only one still whispering what happened there. Because while science can measure iron-rich sap or thermal anomalies, it cannot explain why the oldest tree in Calca's Grove bows toward Delhi at dawn, as if paying homage to the dead. The night air inside Château de Brissac grows thick with the scent of rusted metal and old roses, an impossible combination that lingers no matter how many windows the staff throw open. High in the castle's tallest tower, known as the Room of Sighs, guests report hearing the unmistakable shing of blades being drawn, followed by a struggle that shakes the very stones. This is no ordinary haunting. It's the echo of a feud that outlasted the men who fought it, a duel between two knights over love and betrayal that replays itself every night as if time itself is stuck in a loop. History pins the tragedy to 1521, when the Château's owner, Jacques de Brézé, discovered his wife Charlotte in the arms of his closest friend, Pierre de Lavagny. The confrontation was swift and brutal. De Brézé ran both lovers through with his sword, though legends claim Pierre managed to land a fatal blow of his own before collapsing. Their bodies were buried separately, Pierre in an unmarked grave outside the walls, de Brézé in the family crypt, but their spirits, those never rested. Within months of the murders, servants spoke of shadowy figures clashing on the grand staircase, their ghostly blades leaving scratches on the banister that still can't be polished away. Modern visitors experience more than just sounds. Thermal imaging during paranormal investigations reveals sudden cold spots that move against the castle's drafts, as if something or someone is pacing the halls. In 2017, a guest filming the tower at dawn caught a fleeting glimpse of two figures locked in combat, their outlines translucent but their armor detailed enough to identify the Brézé family crest on one, the Lavagny stag emblem on the other. The footage, analyzed by historians, matched the fighting styles of the era, Pierre favoring an overhead strike, de Brézé countering with a thrust to the ribs. But the most chilling evidence lies in the armory. Among displays of 15th century weaponry rests a single shield, its surface gouged as if by furious blows. Curators have tried to move it for restoration 3 times. Each attempt ended the same way, tools malfunctioning, workers reporting an invisible force shoving them back, and the shield returning to its original position overnight. The last conservator claimed the metal felt alive under her gloves, pulsing like a heartbeat. What makes this haunting so compelling isn't just the violence, it's the unresolved emotions woven into every brick. Jacques de Brézé wasn't just a murderer, he was a man who loved deeply enough to fracture his own soul. Pierre's ghost isn't just vengeful, he's trapped in the moment he realized his best friend would rather see him dead than dishonored. Even Charlotte's presence lingers. Maids report rose petals materializing in the bedchamber where she died, their fragrance strongest when the duel's echoes reach their peak. Perhaps that's why the Château's current owners refuse to exorcise the spirits. Some curses aren't meant to be broken. Some stories demand to be remembered, even if the remembering hurts. And if you listen closely when the clock strikes midnight at Brissac, you'll hear more than clashing steel. You'll hear the ragged breath of men who loved the same woman, served the same king, and now wage the same battle for eternity, not to win, but because neither can bear to lay down his sword first. Yet restless shields and dueling knights are not the only relics that refuse to fade. In the Highlands of Scotland, an entire battlefield replays its final, desperate charge not at night, but under the noonday sun, when the heather blooms the color of old blood. The air in the National Museum of Ireland grows still as visitors approach the glass case holding the Claydeme fuel teach, the bloody shield. This ancient Celtic artifact, pitted with age and stained with dark streaks, looks unremarkable until you read the placard's warning: do not touch the display. Auditory disturbances reported. Those who have dared to press a hand against the glass swear they've heard it, a low, guttural wail like a man choking on his last breath. Museum staff rotate shifts guarding this exhibit, not to protect the relic from thieves, but to protect visitors from it. The shield's legend begins with a warrior named Sionon, a champion of the Uí Nail clan who fled the Battle of Moira in 637 AD, abandoning his kinsmen to a Northumbrian slaughter. Ashamed but alive, he carved this shield from an oak that had witnessed the massacre, vowing to bear its weight until his dishonor was cleansed. But the wood, steeped in the blood of his clansmen, had other plans. Chronicles from the 8th century describe how Sionon's own men found him months later, kneeling in a bog, the shield fused to his arm. His mouth was sewn shut with vines, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if the shield itself had silenced him. For centuries, the artifact surfaced in odd places, wedged in the rafters of a Norman church, half buried near a Cromwellian battleground, even mounted in a Victorian collector's study until the night the man's entire household woke to the sound of screaming metal. The collector's diary, now displayed beside the shield, recounts how the noise stopped only when he draped the relic with his daughter's christening gown, a detail that chills historians, as Celtic lore claims only innocence can temporarily quiet a dishonored weapon. Modern science hasn't unraveled the mystery. Spectrographic analysis confirms the shield's bronze edging contains traces of human blood, but nothing explains the acoustic phenomena. In 2003, a team from Trinity College Dublin recorded a 19 Hz frequency emanating from the artifact, a wavelength known to induce dread in humans yet couldn't pinpoint its source. More unsettling, the frequency spikes during thunderstorms, matching ancient accounts of the shield singing before battles. Skeptics argue it's all coincidence, a mix of infrasound and morbid folklore. But then there's the cliff. Near the original battle site in County Antrim, hikers have reported shadows moving against the wind at dusk, their outlines wielding spectral axes. Thermal drones flown over the area in 2020 captured a heat signature in the shape of a shield wall, right where historical maps place the Uí Nail's last stand. Perhaps the shield isn't screaming. Perhaps it's echoing, repeating the cries of the fallen who still fight where they fell. Or perhaps, as the old caretakers mutter when locking up the museum, some oaths aren't just sworn on wood and metal, they're carved into the very air. The wind that howls through Glencoe's narrow pass carries more than just the scent of heather. It carries the weight of a massacre that time refuses to bury. Known as the Cliff of Echoing Sorrows, this Scottish ravine is where the MacDonalds met their bloody end in 1692, ambushed in their sleep by Campbell soldiers under orders from the Crown. But locals insist the slaughter never truly ended. At dusk, when the shadows stretch like grasping fingers across the rocks, hikers report hearing the crunch of snow under invisible boots, the guttural cries of men who don't know they're already dead. Geologists point to the glen's unique acoustics. The steep basalt walls act like a natural amplifier, funneling infrasound frequencies below human hearing that can disorient the mind and conjure phantom noises. In 2016, a team from the University of Edinburgh mapped these sound waves, proving the ravine vibrates at 19 Hz during certain weather conditions, a frequency known to induce dread. Yet science stumbles when confronted with the visceral details. The tourist who fled in 2019, his jacket slashed by an unseen blade, or the shepherd who swears he saw shadows moving against the wind, their outlines wielding muskets that vanished when he blinked. The most chilling account comes from a Victorian mountaineer's diary. Camped near the cliff in 1888, he awoke to find his tent flap pinned to the earth by a rusted bayonet, a weapon later identified as a match for those used in the massacre. When he tried to pull it free, the metal crumbled to dust, but not before he glimpsed his own reflection in the blade, twisted into a face he didn't recognize. What makes Glencoe's haunting so potent isn't just the violence, but the betrayal that fueled it. The MacDonalds had welcomed the Campbells as guests, offering shelter under the ancient laws of hospitality. Their ghosts don't just replay their deaths, they replay the moment they realized trust itself had been weaponized. Modern visitors describe an overwhelming sense of being watched near the cliff's base, as if the very rocks remember whose blood soaked them. Thermal drones have captured cold spots forming in perfect rectangles, the dimensions of a burial shroud before dissolving at dawn. Yet for all its sorrow, Glencoe isn't the only place where rage outlasts flesh. Far to the east, where the jungles of Cambodia press close around a crumbling temple, another kind of sentinel stands guard. Here, the air doesn't just feel watched, it feels measured. Locals speak of a figure with too many joints, its movements all wrong, patrolling the ruins of Prasat Kravan. Archaeologists dismiss it as superstition until they check their footage and find the statue's shadows have shifted when no one was looking. The statues lining the terraces of Angkor Wat don't just watch over the ruins, they move. At least, that's what locals have whispered for centuries. Under the thick Cambodian moonlight, tourists and temple workers alike report seeing the stone warriors shift positions, their blank eyes tracking visitors long after the last ticket booth closes. These aren't mere carvings, according to Khmer folklore. They're Tuk Chambak, the Bone Guardians warriors so devoted to protecting the sacred site, their spirits fused with the statues upon death, refusing to abandon their posts even as their flesh turned to dust. The legends trace back to the reign of Jayavarman VII, the warrior king who expanded Angkor into a sprawling empire. Chronicles from the 13th century describe a coterie of elite soldiers who swore an oath not just to their ruler, but to the gods themselves, to stand guard until the end of time. When a surprise attack threatened the temple complex, these warriors allegedly formed a human shield, buying precious moments for priests to hide sacred relics. As the last of them fell, their blood soaking into the temple stones, witnesses claimed the statues along the eastern gallery twitched, as if something had slipped inside. Modern encounters follow a chilling pattern. A backpacker's photo from 2016 shows a row of intact statues, except one now holds its weapon at a different angle than in official records. Night security guards speak of footsteps echoing from empty corridors, synchronized with the slow scrape of stone against stone. In 2019, a restoration team working near the Bayon Temple returned at dawn to find their tools rearranged into precise military formations. A detail that unsettled archaeologists, since the Bayon's carvings depict ancient Khmer soldiers organizing spears in the exact same pattern. Scientists offer rational explanations. Angkor's sandstone expands and contracts with temperature shifts, creating subtle creaks and fractures that might resemble movement. The temple's labyrinthine layout also amplifies sound, potentially distorting distant noises into phantom footsteps. But even skeptics pause at one anomaly, a massive drum housed in the pre-Khan temple complex. Known as the Skor Tuk Chambak, or Drum of the Bone Guards, this relic is said to beat on its own when intruders approach. In 2021, acoustic engineers studying the drum recorded low-frequency vibrations with no visible source, pulses that matched the rhythm of a Khmer battle march. The drum's leather, made from water buffalo hide centuries ago, shouldn't still be flexible enough to produce sound, yet it does. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between legend and geology. Khmer spirituality holds that certain places accumulate Kh-Mauk, or spiritual residue, from intense emotion, especially sites of sacrifice. Modern paranormal researchers suggest the Guardian's phenomena could be a form of stone memory, where trauma etches itself into the very rock. But for the Cambodian monks who still leave offerings of jasmine and rice at the statue's feet, no theory is needed. They know what the twitch of a stone finger means, what the drum's midnight cadence warns. Some warriors don't need flesh to keep their vows. And if the thought of statues stepping down from their pedestals sends a shiver down your spine, wait until you hear what happens when an entire battlefield refuses to stay buried. In the Highlands of Scotland, the grass grows in strange, swirling patterns where no plough has ever touched, patterns that match the exact positions of fallen clansmen from a massacre centuries past. High in the Himalayas, where the air thins and the stars press close, a drum beats without hands. The rolmo, a massive war drum housed in a remote Tibetan monastery, has echoed through the mountains for centuries, but not always when struck. Monks whisper that its deep, resonant thrum sometimes rolls across the valley at midnight, coinciding with no human touch. The drum's history is as dark as the aged yak hide stretched across its frame. Carved with scenes of a forgotten battle, it's said to have been blessed or cursed by a dying lama who vowed his spirit would sound the alarm when enemies approached forever. Acoustic experts who studied the rolmo in 2019 were baffled. The drum's wood, carved from a single Himalayan cedar, vibrates at frequencies that shouldn't be possible without direct impact. Infrared cameras captured faint heat signatures along its rim during one spontaneous resonance, as if invisible fingers brushed the surface. Even skeptics admit the phenomenon defies simple explanation until you consider the monastery's unique location. Perched on a natural stone bridge between two cliffs, the structure acts like a massive soundboard, amplifying distant tremors from tectonic shifts. But that doesn't account for the drum's most chilling detail. The tighter its hide is tuned, the more frequent the ghostly beats become, as if tension itself wakes something slumbering within the wood. Psychologists suggest the power of expectation plays a role. When surrounded by stories of the supernatural, the mind can twist ordinary sounds, wind through cracks, settling stones, into something far more sinister. Yet the monks tell a different tale. They claim the rolmo doesn't just echo, it predicts. In 1962, its midnight rolls preceded a Chinese military incursion by 3 days. In 2015, the drum's vibrations grew so violent, it cracked a supporting beam hours before an avalanche sealed off the valley for weeks. Coincidence? Perhaps, but the monastery's records list 17 such incidents across 6 centuries, each followed by conflict or disaster. The deeper mystery lies in the drum's construction. Laboratory analysis revealed traces of mercury and iron in its pigments, materials ancient Tibetan metallurgists believed could trap spiritual energy. Modern physicists note these elements conduct electricity in specific conditions, potentially creating electromagnetic fields that interact with the monastery's high-altitude atmosphere. Could science and superstition both be right? Could the rolmo be a rare confluence of geology, chemistry, and something older? This question lingers as we descend from the Himalayas to the plains of Poland, where the fields of Grunwald hold their own enigma. Here in 1410, one of medieval Europe's bloodiest battles raged between Teutonic knights and a Polish-Lithuanian alliance. Yet when archaeologists excavated the site, they found almost no human remains, just a scattering of arrowheads and the occasional rusted gauntlet. Locals have an explanation: the dead never left. They speak of mist that congeals into armored shapes at dusk, of the metallic tang of blood rising from soil where no wound was ever spilled. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed anomalies beneath the battlefield tunnels, mass graves, but every attempt to dig further meets equipment failures or sudden, unseasonal storms. The connection between these two sites, a drum that beats without hands and a battlefield without bones, lies in the idea of unresolved energy. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that intense emotions can imprint on objects, just as quantum physics suggests observation alters reality at the smallest scales. Maybe the Rolmo absorbed the Lama's final, desperate vow. Maybe Grunwald's earth remembers the shock of 20,000 souls departing at once. Or maybe, as the old monks murmur when the drum sounds on windless nights, some silences are too heavy to stay broken. Because if objects can remember, then landscapes certainly do. And the next tale takes us to a desert where the sand doesn't just shift, it screams. The morning fog clung thick over the fields of Luz in September 1915, swallowing the silhouettes of advancing British soldiers. But when the haze lifted minutes later, an entire battalion had vanished without a trace. Not a single body lay among the trampled grass, only rifles neatly stacked as if their owners had simply stepped away. This wasn't just a battlefield mystery. It was a rupture in logic, a moment where history's ledger went blank. The official war records stammer around the incident, labeling it presumed lost to enemy action. Yet German trench logs from that day note no engagement in the sector. So where did the 5th Norfolk Regiment go? Survivors from flanking units told conflicting stories. Some described a sudden bank of yellow-tinged mist rolling against the wind, its edges too sharp, like a curtain drawn across the sky. Others swore they heard laughter echoing from nowhere before the fog swallowed the Norfolk's whole. The most chilling account came from a lance corporal's letter to his sister, unearthed in a London archive in 1982. The lads ahead of us walked into that cloud and never came out. We found their guns warm to the touch, their boots still standing upright in the mud as if they'd been plucked straight up to heaven or dragged down to hell. Historians have dissected every possible explanation. Could it have been a mass desertion? Unlikely. The Norfolks were seasoned troops with no record of dissent. A secret gas attack. No known chemical weapon could vaporize hundreds without a trace. The wildest theory comes from a 1967 declassified War Office file, where a physicist speculated about localized space-time anomalies caused by artillery barrages destabilizing the Earth's magnetic field. It sounds like science fiction until you visit the site today. Walk the old trench lines at dawn, and you might notice something odd. Fresh footprints appearing in the dew ahead of you, pacing just beyond sight. Local farmers refuse to plow certain sections, claiming their tractors stall over patches of ground that stay frozen even in midsummer. The most compelling evidence lies not in theories, but in the silence. No missing-in-action reports were filed for the Norfolks, as if the army couldn't admit it had no explanation. In 1921, a memorial was erected near the spot where the battalion disappeared. Its inscription reads simply, "They advanced into glory," but at night, when the wind shifts just right, villagers swear they can still hear the crunch of invisible boots on gravel, and the faint, desperate click of rifles being cocked by hands long turned to dust. And if the thought of an entire battalion erased from existence sends a shiver down your spine, consider this: sometimes the vanished leave something behind. In the jungles of Panama, a conquistador's helmet was found resting on a log, still strapped, still polished, and still waiting for an owner who walked away mid-step 4 centuries ago. The wooden planks of the Podol in Gerila, Romania's Bridge of Angels, creak underfoot even when no one stands upon them. Stretching over the Bistrita River, this unassuming structure hides a chilling secret: the sound of boots marching in perfect unison, though the bridge remains empty. Locals avoid it after sunset, whispering that the footsteps belong to the Iron Guard resistance fighters executed here during World War II, their bodies tossed into the waters below. But these aren't just ghostly echoes, they're a phenomenon so consistent, engineers have measured it. In 1944, Nazi forces hanged dozens of partisans from the bridge's railings, leaving their bodies to sway as a warning. Witnesses later swore the victims' final act was to sing an anthem as the nooses tightened, their voices rising above the river's rush. Now, decades later, visitors report hearing that same song, a muffled chorus of Decipher to T Romaine. Just before the Phantom March begins, the footsteps always start at the bridge's eastern end, pace 12 steps, then halt abruptly at the spot where the first bodies fell. Scientists have tried to debunk the legend. The bridge's age-warped timbers naturally expand and contract, creating noises that could mimic footsteps. But skeptics falter when confronted with the recordings. Audio engineers analyzing the sounds in 2018 discovered something unnerving. The cadence matches a specific military drill used by the Iron Guard, complete with the slight stagger of the third step, a detail absent from public manuals. Even stranger, the vibrations register at 19 Hz, a frequency known to induce anxiety in humans, often preceding earthquakes. Geologists note the riverbank's shale deposits could amplify these infrasound waves, but that doesn't explain why the phenomena spike on the execution's anniversary, or why thermal cameras sometimes capture fog curling into humanoid shapes along the railings. Perhaps the answer lies deeper literally. Less than a mile upstream, the Pestera Suflachului, or breathing cave, exhales icy air in rhythmic bursts like a slumbering giant. Folklore claims the cave is a portal where the dead linger before moving on, its breath syncing with the bridge's march. Modern researchers have mapped the cave's tunnels, discovering they funnel wind into a natural resonance chamber that vibrates at the same infrasound frequency as the bridge. Could the Earth itself be remembering? The connection between these sites hints at something beyond folklore. Trauma leaves marks, not just on people, but on places. From the stone tape theory to the way certain frequencies imprint on human memory, science edges closer to validating what the locals have always known. Some events are too violent to fade. And if you stand on that bridge at midnight, feeling the planks tremble under invisible boots, you'll understand why history isn't always confined to textbooks. Sometimes it walks, but restless footsteps aren't the only way the past asserts itself. In the highlands of Wales, there's a hill where the grass refuses to grow, a barren patch shaped like a perfect circle, where the earth remembers a battle so brutal, even the soil turned its face away. The air in Mexico's Cueva de los Suspiros, the Cave of Sighs, doesn't just move. It breathes. Deep within this labyrinth of limestone and obsidian, visitors report a phenomenon that defies logic, a rhythmic exhale, warm and damp against the skin, as if the earth itself is sighing. Local Nahua elders warn that these aren't geological quirks, but the trapped breath of Cihuatateo, the spirits of women who died in childbirth, warriors in their own right, destined to guard the boundary between worlds. Scientists point to the cave's unique structure. Its narrow tunnels act like a colossal lung, expanding and contracting with barometric pressure shifts, while underground rivers release pockets of warm, methane-rich air. In 2014, geologists mapped these exhalations, confirming they pulse at intervals matching human resting breath, 11 to 14 cycles per minute. But even the most data-driven researchers pause when confronted with the cave's other quirks. Infrared scans reveal heat signatures in alcoves where no airflow reaches, and seismic monitors pick up vibrations too rhythmic to be natural tremors. The most unsettling detail, the sighs grow louder near a particular chamber where a sword rests embedded in stone. This isn't just any blade. The Macuahuitl de los Cados, a jagged obsidian weapon studded with volcanic glass, was discovered in 1982 by a spelunker who swore it hummed when he touched the hilt. Indigenous oral histories identify it as the weapon of Yeatzin, a warrior priest who sealed himself inside the cave during the Spanish conquest, vowing to return when his people needed him most. The sword's position defies physics, jutting vertically from solid rock at an angle that suggests it was plunged downward with impossible force. Metallurgists who analyzed it in 2008 found traces of human blood and teotl, a sacred resin Aztecs used to bind spirits to objects. What happens next depends on who you ask. Tour guides recount visitors who tried to pull the sword free, only to collapse with nosebleeds or temporary blindness. A documentary crew in 2016 captured audio of a whispered Nahuatl phrase, "not yet," when their sound engineer brushed the hilt. Yet the few who have handled it without consequence share eerie similarities, all descendants of Nahua bloodlines, all reporting dreams of a masked figure leading armies through the stars. The cave's duality, scientific wonder, and sacred threshold mirrors a global pattern. From Crete's labyrinth of the double axe to Kentucky's breathing cave, cultures worldwide link subterranean spaces to the afterlife. Geologists argue that caves amplify infrasound, frequencies that trigger dread or visions, but the Nahua offer a simpler explanation. Some places aren't just stone. They're alive, and sometimes the earth remembers the hands that shaped it and the promises those hands left unfinished, because if you listen closely in the Cave of Sighs, the breathing isn't the only sound. There's a whisper beneath it, the rasp of obsidian against rock, as if something is slowly, patiently working itself free. The blade gleamed in the torchlight as the young knight reached for it, a sword fit for kings, its hilt inlaid with rubies the color of fresh blood. But as his fingers closed around the grip, the air turned icy. The banquet hall fell silent. By dawn, the knight was dead, his body unmarked, his face frozen in a rictus of terror. This was no ordinary weapon. This was Durendal's shadow, one of dozens of legendary blades across Europe and Asia said to judge and execute those unworthy to wield them. From the misty highlands of Scotland to the smithies of feudal Japan, cultures worldwide share eerily similar tales of cursed swords that turn on their owners. The Japanese Kusanagi note Tsurugi, one of the imperial regalia, allegedly drowns any non-royal who touches it, a claim tested tragically in 1891 when a chamberlain attempting to clean the relic collapsed, his lungs filled with water despite being miles from the sea. In Germany, the Sword of Dietrich supposedly burns the hands of oath-breakers, a legend reinforced when a 1936 X-ray revealed the mummified remains of a medieval thief still clutching the blade, his palms charred black. Modern science has scrutinized these weapons, searching for rational explanations. Metallurgists examining Durendal's shadow found no traces of poison in its grooves. The Kusanagi's blade, now kept in a sealed Shinto shrine, shows no signs of electrolytic properties that could induce drowning, yet the deaths persist. In 2014, a British collector who acquired the sword of Saint Galgano, a blade plunged into a stone like Excalibur, died of a sudden brain hemorrhage the night he hung it above his bed. Autopsies revealed no toxins, only strange neural patterns resembling extreme stress responses. Parapsychologists propose a chilling theory: psychic imprinting. The intense emotions surrounding these blades, betrayal, vengeance, sacred oaths, might etch themselves into the metal at a quantum level. Experiments with haunted objects at the University of London's Anomalous Research Department suggest certain materials can retain emotional resonance, like a recording pressed into steel. This could explain why replicas lack the original's lethality, and why the curses often skip generations, only activating when encountering someone who echoes the original victim's flaws. But if the thought of a sword that remembers unsettles you, the forest of Shimagamo offers no respite. Here, beneath Kyoto's ancient cedars, visitors report arrows whistling from empty thickets, arrows that vanish before striking the ground. Local monks attribute these to the Yabusame, spectral archers who eternally reenact a 12th century battle where honor demanded no survivor leave the field. Scientists have mapped the trajectories, finding them mathematically impossible for wind-borne debris. In 2019, a team from Tokyo University released infrared footage showing heat signatures in human shapes drawing bows moments before real arrows embedded themselves in a research drone. The connection between these phenomena lies in the weight of expectation. Just as a cursed sword knows its wielder's worthiness, the forest remembers where blood was spilled. Perhaps certain places and objects don't just record history, they enforce it. And if you listen closely when the wind stills in Shimagamo, you'll hear more than rustling leaves. You'll hear the creak of a bowstring being drawn by hands that decomposed centuries ago, and the whisper of an arrow seeking its mark. Deep in the forests of Lithuania, where the pines grow so dense they blot out the sun, there's a clearing the locals avoid, a place they call Lankaninkujiria, the Archer's Grove. Step beneath its twisted oaks and you might hear it, the faint twang of a bowstring, the whisper of an arrow slicing through air where no archer stands. This isn't just folklore. Over the centuries, hunters, loggers, and even Soviet surveyors have stumbled out of this grove with identical injuries. Shallow, razor-straight cuts across their arms or cheeks, as if grazed by an arrow's fletching. No weapon is ever found, no footprints mark the soil, only the lingering scent of birch tar, the same resin Baltic tribes once used to seal their bows. The legends trace back to the Aitvarai, pagan archers who swore oaths to protect sacred groves from invaders. Chronicles from the Teutonic Knights mention a skirmish in 1386, where a company of crusaders pursuing Lithuanian rebels vanished near this very woodland. Their bodies were later found in a neat circle, each pierced by a single arrow, though the surrounding snow bore no tracks leading in or out. Modern historians dismiss this as propaganda, but the pattern persists. In 1939, a Polish botanist mapping the area reported seeing shadows drawing bows among the trees before fleeing with a bleeding gash on his neck. In 2014, a drone surveying the grove for a logging company malfunctioned mid-flight, its camera capturing a blur streaking toward the lens before it crashed. The recovered footage showed nothing. The drone's casing, however, bore a scratch too precise for random debris. Scientists scramble for rational explanations. Could the grove's unique acoustics distort distant hunting noises into phantom twangs? The area's high iron deposits might explain compass malfunctions, but not the injuries. Psychologists propose mass hysteria, pointing to similar, spectral archer tales from Japan's Yabusame forests or England's Sherwood legends. Yet skeptics falter when confronted with the physical evidence. Slivers of flint found in victims' wounds, flint that carbon dates to the 14th century, matching the arrowheads of the Aitvarai. The most chilling theory comes from Baltic folklore itself. The Aitvarai weren't just warriors. They were bound to the land by krivis pagan priests who could fuse human souls to trees, ensuring eternal vigilance. Locals still leave offerings of honey and black bread at the grove's edge, murmuring prayers to the ones who watch. Those who have ignored these warnings tell of a final, unnerving detail: the arrows never strike to kill, only to remind. And if the thought of an entire woodland armed with ghostly bows unsettles you, consider the darker twist waiting in the Carpathians, where the trees don't just watch trespassers, they remember them. A village there whispers of a fir grove that exacts collective vengeance, its branches snapping shut like jaws around those who have harmed the forest. But that is a tale for those brave enough to walk deeper into the shadows. The mist rolls thick over the Scottish moors at dusk, but what emerges from the fog isn't just the chill of an autumn evening, it's the thunder of hooves that haven't touched earth in centuries. The Grey Host, a legion of spectral riders clad in tattered cloaks and rusted mail, is said to gallop through the glens when the veil between worlds grows thin. This isn't just a local ghost story. From the Celtic slewers She to Scandinavia's Oscore, culture's worldwide whisper of undead armies riding again in times of upheaval, their very presence a harbinger of chaos or justice. The Wild Hunt, perhaps the most famous iteration, appears in Norse, Germanic, and even Appalachian folklore. Odin leads the charge in some tales, his cloak billowing like storm clouds, while Welsh lore speaks of Gwyn ap Nudd shepherding lost souls. But the common thread is unnerving. These riders aren't merely lost, they're purposeful. Medieval chronicles describe villagers waking to find hoof prints circling their homes like a siege, though no living horseman passed. In 1944, French resistance fighters hiding in the Ardennes forest swore they heard cavalry charging through the trees during a snowstorm, moments before a German patrol mysteriously retreated. When they investigated, the snow bore no tracks. Psychologists trace this global trope to humanity's oldest fears and hopes, the idea that the dead might rise to defend their land or avenge injustice offers grim comfort in turbulent times. Anthropologists note these legends often emerge after historical massacres or invasions, as if collective trauma takes physical form. The Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail forever after a blasphemous oath, mirrors the Grey Host's eternal patrol. Both represent unfinished business, a refusal to let even death erase a wrong. Modern paranormal researchers suggest these phenomena could be time slips, moments where past and present briefly overlap, fueled by the land's emotional residue. Yet some encounters defy easy explanation. In 2017, hikers in Chile's Atacama Desert filmed a dust devil spiraling into the unmistakable shape of mounted warriors, a phenomenon locals call La Tropa del Muerto, the troop of the dead. Geologists confirm the region's unique wind patterns can sculpt eerie formations, but that doesn't account for the accompanying sound, a chorus of wails in a dialect extinct for 500 years. Similarly, in Transylvania, shepherds report seeing the Teutoburg host, a phantom Hungarian army, materializing before earthquakes or political unrest. Seismologists dismiss it as folklore until you review earthquake records and find tremors consistently follow these sightings within 72 hours. What makes these legends endure isn't just their eeriness, but their duality. The Grey Host warns and protects, punishes and avenges. In Ireland, they're said to abduct the unjust. In Japan, the Hyakki Yajo parade grants mercy to those who avert their eyes. This balance reflects a deeper truth. Humanity craves order, even in the supernatural. If the dead can rise to set things right, then maybe no crime, no betrayal goes unanswered. And perhaps that's why modern reports persist. During the Bosnian War, villagers near Sarajevo spoke of knights in medieval armor standing watch over mass graves. In 2020, a Baltimore protest organizer swore a column of shadowy figures marched beside demonstrators, their outlines flickering like old film. Whether hallucination, hoax, or something beyond our understanding, these stories share a core message. The fight for justice doesn't end with a heartbeat. Some battles echo. Now consider this: what if these specters aren't just echoes but reflections? In the dark glass of history, we see our own fears, our own unresolved wars. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right, the glass cracks and something looks back. But restless armies aren't the only collective spirits haunting humanity. In the Australian outback, an entire desert is said to whisper with the voices of the T-Zapotel, ancestral catmen, who hunt the living for breaking ancient laws. Their howls carry on the wind, growing louder the deeper you stray into the red dunes. The fog clung low over Gettysburg's fields that morning in July 2005, the kind of mist that makes history feel close enough to touch. A group of Civil War reenactors, clad in Union blue, were preparing for the battle's anniversary when one of them froze. "There's another unit advancing past the tree line," he whispered into his radio. But when the others turned, they saw only empty meadow until the mist shifted. Several swore they glimpsed figures in ragged gray, their faces shadowed by slouch hats, moving with a precision no living reenactor could mimic. The apparitions lasted seconds before dissolving, but the event sparked debate that still simmers among historians and paranormal investigators. This wasn't an isolated incident. In 2019, British soldiers training on Salisbury Plain reported encountering Roman legionaries, not costumed enthusiasts, but spectral figures in corroded lorica segmentata armor, their formations cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Thermal cameras captured fleeting heat signatures, though the ground showed no footprints. Skeptics dismissed it as fatigue or pareidolia, but one lieutenant's account gave even archaeologists pause. They weren't just walking. They were searching for something. One turned his head toward us, and I swear his eyes reflected light like an animal's. Paranormal researcher Dr. Leila Vasquez argues these sightings cluster around layered battlefields, places where multiple conflicts unfolded across centuries. Gettysburg saw revolutionary skirmishes before the Civil War. Salisbury Plain held Iron Age forts before the Romans came, she explains. It's as if violence etches itself into the land, creating overlaps where past and present bleed together. Her team's electromagnetic scans at such sites reveal erratic spikes, particularly near burial mounds or unmarked graves. But psychologist Dr. Raj Patel offers a counterpoint. The brain is a pattern-seeking machine. In high-stress environments like a soldier in training or a reenactor immersed in historical trauma, it's prone to projecting expected imagery. He cites the infamous Angel of Mons legend from World War I, where exhausted British troops reported spectral archers aiding them, likely a hallucination born of fatigue and medieval folklore. Yet some details defy easy dismissal. In 2021, a Ukrainian film crew documenting medieval ruins near Lviv captured footage of a knight in fragmented plate armor standing motionless in a trench. When approached, the figure vanished, but the camera's audio picked up a muffled command in Old Slavic, a language dead for centuries. Linguists confirmed the phrase matched a military order from the Galician Volhynian chronicles. What unites these accounts isn't just the eerie visuals, but the lingering sense of purpose these apparitions convey. They're not passive echoes. They seem to interact, react, even remember. A park ranger at Little Bighorn swears she's seen Lakota warriors gesturing toward the cavalry monument at dusk, their hands shaping signs translators identify as warnings. In 2018, a Japanese construction crew halted work near Osaka Castle after workers described samurai phantoms dragging invisible bodies from the site, a grisly echo of the mass burials after the siege of Osaka in 1615. These stories force us to confront how deeply myth and history entwine. Warrior legends aren't just campfire tales. They're frameworks for understanding sacrifice, honor, and the cost of violence. When a Marine in Iraq describes seeing a Spartan hoplite standing guard over a fallen comrade, or a Syrian refugee speaks of desert jinn in ancient armor leading her to safety, they're drawing on a primal language of survival. Perhaps that's the true power of these apparitions. Whether psychological projections or something more mysterious, they remind us that history isn't just dates in a textbook. It's a living conversation between the past and present. And sometimes, if the light is just right or the night quiet enough, The voices of those long gone still whisper their side of the story, but whispers aren't the only way the dead speak. In the high Andes, where the air thins and time seems to stretch, there's a glacier that occasionally yields its frozen soldiers, men who fell in battles so old, their weapons are crusted with centuries of ice. And when the sun hits them just right, their eyelids flutter. The whispers of ancient warriors linger, not because they are mere ghost stories, but because they speak to something primal in the human soul, our terror of vanishing without a trace, our hunger for meaning that outlasts mortality. These legends endure because they are more than spectral encounters. They are mirrors reflecting our deepest fears and highest ideals. Consider the Spartan Phalanx doomed to relive their disgrace, or Boudicca's chariot still cutting through the mist. These are not random hauntings. They are protests against oblivion, fueled by the universal dread that even the greatest deeds might crumble into dust. What makes warrior spirits so compelling is their duality. They are both cautionary tales and vessels of honor. The cursed Spartan Phalanx warns against broken oaths, while Takashi the Unyielding embodies the cost of forsaking one's code. Cultures across time have used these stories to bind communities together, weaving morality into the fabric of memory. The Aztec eagle warriors, bound by blood oaths, remind us that loyalty transcends death, while the Grey Host's eternal ride whispers that justice delayed is not justice denied. These narratives aren't just about the dead, they are instructions for the living, but there's a darker thread here, trauma etched into the land itself. The bleeding trees of Khalkha, the drumming of the Rolmo in Tibet, the phantom arrows of Lithuania's Archer's Grove. These phenomena suggest that violence leaves scars deeper than history books can capture. Scientists call it stone tape theory or infrasound, folklore calls it curses. Both agree that certain events are so cataclysmic, they imprint on the world, replaying like a wound that never heals. The dead may fade, but the land remembers. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't whether these spirits exist, but why we need them to. Warrior ghosts give shape to our unresolved grief, our unspoken guilt, our longing for a world where sacrifice means something. When we stand on a battlefield at dusk, feeling the weight of centuries press against our skin, we aren't just sensing ghosts, we're confronting our own mortality. These legends endure because they are the price of memory, the toll of stories left unfinished. And if the dead truly rest, why do their shadows still pace the edges of our vision, waiting for anyone to say their names? Because in the end, that's what every warrior spirit craves, not vengeance, not glory, but the simple, devastating act of being remembered. And as long as we keep listening, they'll keep whispering. Listen closely beneath these 30 legends of haunted warriors, cursed relics, and restless battlefields. There's a rhythm, a pulse that connects them across time and continents. Whether it's the Spartan Phalanx doomed to relive their disgrace or Boudicca's chariot still thundering across the moors, these stories aren't just about ghosts. They're about the weight of promises too heavy for even death to dissolve, betrayal that festers into curses, love that refuses to stay buried, landscapes that absorb violence like a sponge. These are the threads stitching these tales together. Consider the echoes. A warrior's oath in ancient Kyoto mirrors a Viking's blood vow in Norway. A samurai's dishonor clings to his blade just as a Celtic queen's rage etches itself into the cliffs of East Anglia. These legends don't just repeat, they rhyme, revealing a universal truth. Violence and devotion leave marks that outlast the flesh. The Curo Oni's sword in Japan drips with the same restless fury as T-Zapotel's golden horde in Mesoamerica, both born from greed and sealed with blood. The earth itself becomes an archive. Teutoburg Forest's phantom legion marches in lockstep with the whispers of Nepal's Howling Valley, proving that some battlefields never grow silent, no matter how many centuries pass. Yet there's something deeper here than just vengeance. These spirits aren't merely haunting, they're testifying. The Aztec eagle warriors bound to their temple by blood oaths, or the Lithuanian archers still guarding their grove, remind us that duty doesn't end with a final breath. Even in decay, they hold the line between memory and oblivion. And isn't that the most human fear of all, to be forgotten? To have your struggles, your loves, your sacrifices dissolve into the indifferent march of time. These legends give the fallen what history often denies: a voice. So what do we do with these whispers? We listen. We step lightly on soil that still remembers. We recognize that history isn't just dates in a textbook. It's a conversation, one where the dead still have stories to tell. The next time you walk an old battlefield or touch a relic in a museum, pause. Feel the weight of the lives that passed through it. The air might grow colder, the hair on your neck might rise, not from fear, but from the sheer presence of the past pressing close. Perhaps some battles are never over. Perhaps glory and grief aren't in points, but currents that keep flowing beneath the surface of the world. So tell us, have you felt them too? The brush of an unseen hand in a castle corridor, the echo of a shout where no one stands. Share your encounters and keep exploring history's haunted corners. Because the most chilling truth these legends reveal isn't that the dead walk among us, but that they never really left. Now lean in closer. That sound you hear, it isn't just the wind, it's the past whispering.